Hi, we're going to get right along into the next phase here, which would be talking a little bit about the different component strands of the visual arts, also getting into a bit of creative revision and how you can teach your students about the revision process through using Play-Doh. Thanks again. Hope you enjoy. Hi there. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about creative revisions. This is a really great way of getting your students to think about the revision process with writing. It's a pretty neat idea. Actually, what you're going to do is you're going to need two things for your students. One of them, a little tub of Play-Doh. You can pick that up at Michael's. You can head over to Walmart. They sell these really small party pack ones. Those work very, very good for this type of activity. And you're also going to need maybe a sheet of construction paper to put underneath it so that your students can have some type of a working mat. And there's a reason why they will need this type of mat as they're working. I'll explain as we get a little closer to the end of this clip. So basically what you want your students to do is take their Play-Doh, take it out of the little container, create something. Maybe you give them a minute or two and say, I'd like for you to create something. More than likely, if you just say create something, it might take them a little while to get started. So if you narrow down their thinking a little bit and you say something along the lines of, I'd like you to create something related to your comic. Now we're moving along pretty well with this, and they'll be moving a little bit quicker. So first thing, I'd like for you to create something related to your comic. Maybe a character, maybe your protagonist, maybe your antagonist, maybe a resource, maybe something just in general that's going on with your comic. Give them a minute or two. After that, you're timing them this time, by the way, and after that you would have them move right along into the second step, which is add something to it. So maybe they've created some great image of a house, and they have this wonderful house. It's made out of Play-Doh. Now you want them to add something to it. They might add, say for example, a chimney, a door, some detail work on a window, maybe detail work on the roof or the house, maybe the shingles. After they add to it, of course you would give them another minute or two. Then you want to come back and say, okay, so you've created this wonderful idea. Now I'd like for you to change it a little bit. Think of what can you do to change it to make it better. Say they created the house, they added the chimney, and not only did they add the chimney, but they also added a window. So now they're going to change it. How are they going to change it? They might do that by, say, adding some type of thing to it, or maybe editing it in a sense. This is what they're doing. After they change it, the next thing you want to have them do is remove from it. Maybe they could remove in regards to size. Maybe they could remove in regards to something that they didn't really like. This is the perfect opportunity. And if you think about it right now, we're really getting into revision. It's the same thing we do with writing. The only thing is now your students are able to conceptualize it. They can play with the idea here. After they've gone through the first 4 ideas, create something, add to it, change it, remove from it. After you've done that, the next idea is to have your students place their work, if they haven't done so, take the thing that they've created and edited and revised, and actually place it on their working mat. After they place it on their working mat, the next thing for them to do is to actually put it, or just set it there and have them do a gallery walk. They'll need to be walking around with a pencil because during this time their job is to leave positive feedback or positive comments on other people's work. So you're going to have them maybe write something like, hey, I really like this creation that you made. I love the house with the roof and the chimney. It looks awesome. And you want to have them write that. And you're going to give them time. You could give them some type of rule here. Maybe you need to comment on 10 people's, or you need to comment on everyone's, depending on your class size. After you've done that, okay, everyone, we've done our gallery walk. During a gallery walk, by the way, should be extremely quiet. All students are simply looking, they're watching, seeing what's going on with the work. As they're seeing, they're thinking, then they're writing down a really positive idea or something that they really like. It's all about positive feedback here. After the gallery walk, okay guys, everyone head back to your seats, take a seat, and we're going to move on. Now we would get into a reflection. The reflection comes in three parts. The first part is a very simple question in the form of what. What did you do? What did you create? What was it all about? You're only explaining the process here. You'd have your students do this. What was the process like for them? They might say, like, to answer the question what, I got Play-Doh, I opened it, I took it out of the container, I created a house, I added a chimney, I added detail work on the windows. That's what. After that, you would have them move on to the so what process, or the so what portion of it, which is the second phase. To answer so what, it's basically saying, why is this idea important or significant? They might say, oh, this idea here was really important because we were changing things, and this is how we begin to change things in writing. This is where they're going to start to create those connections. Why is it important to make those things? So they're answering now, so what? So what is the importance of this? So what is the significance of doing a gallery walk? So what is the importance of creating? That's essentially what they're going to be answering the question to. Then in the very third phase of the reflection, the very last question is, now what? Now what? Your students would answer, now that you've used this, now what are you going to do with this new information? It could be something like, oh, now that I've learned this, I really understand the writing process better. Now I'm going to edit and revise things much, much more effectively and much better. Thank you very much. That was just a real quick creative revision, and I've got a video for you that you can kind of see. It'll be a very short one, but it'll give you a really good idea as to what this is all about. This way you can see it and conceptualize it a bit more. Thank you again. Bye-bye. So we've gone through a creative revision already. You've done this with your students. You've given them the Play-Doh. They've gone through the gallery walk. They did the reflection with the three phases and three components to it. Now, what comes next? The next thing you want to do with your students is have them grab their rough draft. And you want to start to time them on different things. So maybe we're getting more along the lines into proofreading here. So you might give them a minute and say, for 1 minute you're going to check for nothing but capitals, for capital letters. So they would check all of their dialogue and their sentences and make sure that all of it was adequate. So they would be checking essentially for proper nouns. When they were done with that, after the minute or 2 minutes, however much time you feel is adequate, you would want to move on and say, okay, now we're going to check for all of our end punctuation, periods, question marks, that type of stuff. You have 2 minutes, okay, ready, set, go. So for those 2 minutes, your students are checking, they're reading through all of theirs, checking for their periods, quotation marks, or end punctuation, exclamation marks included in there. After the 2 minutes are over, okay, so we've checked for capitalization, we've checked for end punctuation. The very next thing we want to check for is spelling. So now you have your students, give them another 2 minutes. Okay, we're going to check for spelling. Here goes. We're checking for spelling in 3, 2, 1, ready, go. They would all start checking and reading through their papers and their rough draft, and they're only looking for spelling. The reason why we do this is because we want them to focus very specifically on one task at a time. So only the capital letters, only the end punctuation, only the spelling. After this, going through this process, I might do this type of proofreading in 1 day. Then, the next day, I might have them switch papers and go through the process again. It's okay to write on the rough draft, and it's okay to make corrections and revisions there. We want to make those. As a teacher, those are the types of things I want to see, because I don't want them to have to do it again on the final project, which is the actual canvas here. This is where your students don't want to make any mistakes at all. That's the reason why we spend time going through it. Also, you want to have them check for some of the smaller detail work, like maybe if their buildings, are the buildings drawn adequately, or if the buildings have writing on them, you want them to include that in the spelling checks. And that's basically the next part of it. So maybe day one, have them go through the capital letters and punctuation and spelling. Day two, switch with a partner, run through the same process. Now the only thing is they're not checking their work, they're checking a partner's work. And they might feel a little bit more accountable, so they'll be checking a little more in depth. And that's an extra tidbit on going through and revising. Thanks again, we'll see you soon. Hi there, we're going to take a short break right now. We've gone through a few different topics and ideas. Thank you very much for hanging in there with us.